Thanks, Marc Aurel, for
Right.
presenting today, and on Ars Electronica. Is that the title?
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much. Over to you.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks for joining this talk. I will obviously talk about the Ars Electronica and the submissions which we did in New Zealand. And I believe all of you know me who's on Zoom at the moment, so I don't need to introduce myself any further. And I will jump directly into the my presentation. Ta-da! Title. Can you give me feedback that you see everything well?
Yes, that looks good.
Perfect. Right. I'll have to see how we go next slide here. So Ars Electronica, for people who don't know, is basically the world's largest media technology festival, which is every year in Linz in Austria. You could compare it to a certain extent with the Biennale in Venice or such an event. It brings together people from art, design, over to technology, media, and with the outlook or the integration of society. So it is not a pure gadget exhibition or something. It is really about the involvement of people and from the people's lens, how art and technology can come together. And it's quite internationally attended. Now, this year with COVID, things had to be changed, and most of it went then online. Here you see quickly an overview. Ars Electronica is not only the art exhibition, there's a lot of program around. There's festival, there is talks, there is more sort of a future lab, there are seminars and so on, awards. So just if you have time, go to the website and you can check it out. So what I said, Ars Electronica this year had the title of In Kepler's Garden, saying instead of that everybody comes to Linz and showcase the work there, we now have it the other way around. Everybody stays where they are, and we use technology to connect the different artworks through a technology hub. And these are all the participants, roughly 120. We are also on that one. You see where the dots are. These were all participants coming together. So what I always say is about if we think about digital technologies, not as a tool or instrument, but much more a way of how we think and interact about design and the creative area. That puts it in a very different context, so that we not just use a digital tool, but see of how the digital environment is actually a partner in the design context, and it allows us to work in a partnership around that. The other kind of thing which is always expected when one works with digital tool is, well, it's never the final version. Yeah, we can change. It's easy to change. We can change. So the change stops only then there when you have your submission and your deadline. But even then, there is never a point where it's fixed and says that is now the piece. It's always a fluxus. And that's a very interesting environment in which one works, that it's not only the artwork, but it is the gradient, it's the ever-changing and evolving of the artwork. I put this in this context, which I now say a little bit also with Degas' dualism, who formed that idea that there is the mind and the body, and they have to react to each other and communicate together, which is either to form what the human is actually doing. And I translate that a bit towards the digital tool instruments, the media, and what we want to do. So there is certainly also a giving and taking between what the tool can do, what we can do, and what our achievements are. This is the realm in which we work. On the left side, the real life reality. Now we probably work in a kind of a mediated reality, nearly an augmented reality, having Zoom, me on the camera, but then all the work which you see more in a virtual context. The work which I will present sits very much on the virtual and the virtuality side rather than on the real thing and the exploration of it. Problem framing, I mean, it's all very clear to us that I put architectural design, but it's basically design is really the interesting part that is ill-defined, it's wicked problem. And by that, we actually formulate what the problem is and we state what it is by in our creative engagement, and that then generates reactions and probably solutions maybe, or indication of it. Now coming to the sort of narrow down, Ars Electronica in New Zealand, a couple of colleagues came together and say, what can we contribute to Ars Electronica? It was led by Uwe Rieger from AUT, who was involved in Ars Electronica in earlier years. And we thought, okay, how can we now, under the topic which was given Kepler's garden of Ars Electronica, generate a garden from Aotearoa and New Zealand. And this is basically sort of the initial sketch, what we could put together. So different elements of how we come together in this context. And an initial idea was actually that we have a physical exhibition, so the physical space in which then the virtual elements are placed. So you can visit the New Zealand garden physically as well as virtual. Here on the screen you see a sketch of the physical entity with screens, monitors and so on, different interaction. Unfortunately, because it was the middle of COVID, that could not materialize, so we only have the virtual entity and not that hybrid one from the physical and the virtual one. So it moved then more to this kind of image. You could say a movie strip where then the different projects were placed on. And these are the projects which you find if you go to the website ars.nz. You will see all that, and then also the access to the different projects. I will not present now all of the New Zealand projects. I will now focus a bit more on the projects which we from Victoria made, and basically as a representative of the other works. So you see here, these are the projects which were overall presented from New Zealand. There's a very rich and a very wide range from them, really from a very more pure virtual one to more an augmented reality or more reality version. So, but it's worthwhile to explore the different elements, and I'd be happy to assist you with this. First project, Architecture of the Sea, by these authors, which you now see on the screen. They were looking and were interested in what is actually under the sea level, and if we now go further down, the landscape which offers itself under the sea, and then using different technologies, photography, poems, film, and different zooms to understand and to bring a discussion around the world which is under the sea. You could say it's a kind of an interesting or important aspect for New Zealand, being an island nation, obviously surrounded by a lot of water, to have a different relationship, not being on top of the water, but actually explore what's also underneath the level. So this is one of the artworks which was there, looking at a micro level, what is happening with fluids, with organism, with air bubbles, and how that spaces and the movement in the sea is defined in different scales, in different materials, using here that's salt crystals which sit on the floor, the ocean floor, and how they move, how water moves through them, how the different liquids dissolve the salt, and how that changes the visibility. Here, now just a couple of more samples. I don't show you the full video, we don't have enough time, but something to explore in your own time. This was then you could say the sub-pavilion or the artwork which that group put together. It's a multimedia installation. It sort of redefines what a gallery space is, because it's not a linear experience, it's an experience which you can interactively go through, experience the world under the sea with poems, with sound, readings, and you it's like a bricolage of different aspects and different vistas which you bring together. You see also the artwork is on the floor rather than only on the wall, also nothing on the top, so emphasizing the really being deep under the sea and exploring these aspects from that lens. Again, there's much more to see in this one, and I encourage you to go in there. Another very interesting project was where we had a visiting scholar here last year for over half a year, Thomas Tucker from Virginia Tech, and he explored of how different sensors and engagement within a virtual environment, how you can actually visualize and experience that. So not only the visual, but it is also the haptic, the touch, the sound, the smell, and bringing this all together. So what you see here is now what you would see having the headset and the experience, what you kind of experience, because on the screen it's always different than if you're immersed. But in reality, so on the right side is the person who sees it. Now there is also an actor, a puppeteer, who generates this experience for you. So you see an object and you can touch it and you react to it. So there is a one-to-one mapping between the physical object, which the puppeteer now holds and brings to you, and your interaction. That is a very interesting symbiosis between being purely immersed in a virtual environment, but at the same time having a mirror, basically a parallel world in reality, which facilitates the experience. So it is, you would say, very often we look from a reality point of view towards a virtual reality. But this one is the other way around, looking from a pure virtuality towards a reality context, and see how that can inform what you do. This project, again, a group project here called Geheimnis, is an episode, is a journey through 10 different chapters. Geheimnis is a German word for secret, for mystery, for a discovery of something which you never knew before and suddenly makes sense, and you don't want to share it yet. It's a certain insecurity about it, and you slowly share that and get sort of more confident around that. And this is this episode where we now have this 10 different chapters, so that we can again assemble them in your own context, where we explore different aspects of elements that are pure virtual environment, virtual computer, which I often and then accordingly other narratives go through these elements, which I will show you then in more detail in a minute. So you just see again, it's a space which you then explore this environment. So these are the works in there, the projects, and just as a representative, a couple of them. This is a work with Kimberly, which we did together, looking at the Alice in Wonderland story from a different aspect, taking photogrammetry, drawings, physical drawings, bringing them into a virtual environment, and by that collage together a 3D environment, a 3D space, which is actually made out of 2D elements. And it goes then the whole story of Alice in Wonderland. You just saw the going through the tunnel, being now in a different scale, having then the different aspects to it, and then it comes to then the full story. And I again don't want to bore you with this one here. If you are interested, I can also give you the VR experience. Just come by. Karin did a very interesting project around Kowloon Wall City, and Kowloon Wall City is an old building in Hong Kong, knocked down. Old, beautiful old world, which only is very unique. It's basically super packed urban block. And it's a city in the city. It has its own legal system and its own economy and how things work in there. And it was a virtual place, you could say, within Hong Kong. And real, now being knocked down, it is only a virtual place. And to take that back and now translate that experience in a virtual environment without making a copy and having sort of a forensic and a preservative aspect to it, but taking the essence of it and bringing it in, it's a contemporary reinterpretation of the space and experiences, which matches the medium and the way what you can explore in that. So you go through, there's different elements which you experience when you go through the city, the dark areas, you come to light areas, you come to where you see how people live, but it is all in an abstract, translated way. There is no purpose like a game that you can score anything. It is really your own exploration, sort of your flaneur, how you would flaneur through a city or through your context, flaneuring through this environment and experience it in this way. Good, next one. And the visual tea, this is a project which we work at the moment on it, looking and saying, like, maybe skip that one with a heat map. But the eye typically is which you use to absorb information. You see things, but you never generate things. And this one with eye tracking and other technology, now in VR, we are able to generate objects. So all the objects which you see here, the creating and the subtraction is only done with the eye, so through looking. So you extend your sense, which was until now a one way, so sort of consuming, you reverse that and you be able to generate, which you normally would have done with your hand, or let's say with the voice, it generates something, but you not absorb the words. So it is a very interesting new project of exploring your senses in two ways. Again, that's only possible in a virtual environment, and it's possible to define spaces, to generate things. Sure, it needs a little training, like everybody. If you want to play a piano, you need a little training around that. But it is a very low threshold, and suddenly it allows you to use your body and your senses in two ways: in the generation and in the consuming of what you see. Another project which we did with Cyrus was about symbols of faith in a virtual environment. How can you generate a credible, authentic spiritual place within a VR environment? For example, if you look now at Islamic faith, where you orientate yourself towards Mecca, in VR there is no Mecca. So how can you now generate a fundamental praxis, which is so crucial to how you practice the faith? how can you translate that in a VR without that it is tried or it's just not the real thing. Another thing is in that same thing, the experience of the cleansing and water and washing. How can you make something which is unique to VR, but it still has this experience or the meaning of the washing, and you can experience that. It's all relevant. If you think about the International Space Station, it's the same situation. There's no mecha, there's no water per se. So how can one deal with this environment? Wrapping up quickly here, another project looking into really what are core elements within a pure virtual environment, which follows very different rules and definition what reality doesn't have. So how can you translate orientation, how can you translate spaces and so on, movement in a pure virtual environment without trying to copy, but to be unique to the technology and the media and the computational aspect to it. And that this is this experiment here. Sure, it still has a very personal interpretation to it, but it is a first attempt about doing this whole thing. Wrapping up, Corbusier went to Rome, used very basic shapes, used a very basic shape to describe what Rome is. And that's the interesting part. With a very basic shape, very simple shape, you can generate a very interesting city like Rome. But I think he transferred that more, not only that you can place a city, but you can actually bring a society, a livelihood, the whole Italian flair into it. This is really the combination of how we do the whole thing. That's the team. Thank you. I'm not doing all that. I wish I could have so much time, but I have great colleagues, great students, great partners, and this is how we work in this whole context. Check out these two websites where you see the Ars Electronica New Zealand and the work which I now showed more at the end of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Marc Aurel. That was fantastic. Oh, sorry. Any questions? I have one just quickly.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate smell into this? I just can't quite work out how you do that.
Right. So we're working at the moment with a project with Liam on temperature. So when you're there, if you see something, how do you can feel the heat or the cold? So there's again something that we work in technology that, you know, there's heat lamps and so on. But the same with smell. Well, you have to generate the smell, and it has to match the story, right? There were in the cinemas I think in the 50s, 60s, when they first had the 3D movies, they also tried to bring in smell, and they had sort of scratch cards. And then whenever the movie, the position was, and were to scratch it, or they had in the seat certain sprays, and then it comes out.
Right.
This is how much you want to, how important it is, and you can find a solution to it.
Sure, cool. Any other questions? That was very interesting, by the way, really fascinating.
It's just, you're very welcome to come to Dara, then I can give you the immersive experience.
Right.
And you go through, it's very different from what you see on the screen, and you will suddenly realize that it captures your whole body in that what you see and what you do.
Sure. Any other questions?
How do we do that kind of thing, but in a shared kind of way, rather than it being a single person experience?
Well, that's a big discussion at the moment, right? So you can have certainly multiplayer. Everybody has a headset. The problem is with the headset that you don't see your partner, but you could do it with an augmented reality, sort of have augmented reality glasses where you see the partner, or you use spaces which are where everything is projected around you, and then you be in a person within that space, and you're the partner. but shared workspaces that exist already. So for example, the videos, the gallery spaces, which I showed you, they are based on a Mozilla hub. So there can be 50 people in the same space. You can communicate, you can take selfies, you can take, film clips, and you can by that directly talk and work together and experience it together.
So that's not co-located, people in different locations taking part in the same virtual space, either the experience or design-wise.
Yes. So that was also part of the Ars Electronica when it started. So people really around the world visited the different hubs. So they came to the New Zealand hub from all over the world and talked. So it was at the same time was a synchronous thing. So you have to, people have to get up at different times that they can see that. If you want to do an asynchronous, it becomes a bit more difficult, but you could think of like a podium discussion where one person says something and the microphone is passed on to the next one. So you do something in the virtual environment and that's kind of recorded. It's then time-wise experienced, delayed by the next group who then can react to it and do something and then to the next one or come back to the first one. So that there's possibilities for a synchronous and asynchronous collaboration.
Sorry, when you're talking about time as that dimension, are you talking about asynchronous, closely linked in time? I'm thinking of the multiplying time project from some years ago when it was a project 8 hours in developed in the USA, 8 hours in Europe, 8 hours in Australia or New Zealand or whatever. That's the one that seems to have had lots of potential, but not really been exploited to a great degree recently.
I worked on this project and it was actually quite fascinating. And it was all the documentation of how a design stream, basically it worked like the first group started working, they put it into a database where then the next group could pick whatever they want. They developed it further and then the next group again picked it. And you could see of how certain ideas carried on or had then branches were taken up by other people while others died. That was a very interesting concept. It's actually done by Arup is working in that way. They have offices around the world and certain projects are sent around like that. Some large offices do that. You could think of if you submit something to an editorial service, you submit it, any editor around the world picks it up, does something, and you get it back whenever that's done. So it's location independent and time independent.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go to a meeting, but I'll leave you guys I'll just leave my computer here and leave you talking if you like.
Okay.
Okay. We could have this conversation separately, but I was thinking about the virtual environment making that communication, that what you're talking about, instead of the Arup kind of thing of a document or like the design work from multiplying time project being left and then another one picks it up, being more of a continuous and more smooth kind of environment that exists all the time and people take part whenever they are able to.
Yes, you could do it the same in the VR. I mean, what it basically does, you generate something and that's then deposit in that environment and then the next person picks up. The question is how much prior knowledge the person would need to pick it up. So would you do a recording while this whole thing is generated and you watch that so that you can continue, or you just say, okay, that's what it is. There's maybe some notes and you continue. But it's that's very simple. I mean, that's already possible with the multiplayer games. That's where people do, or Second Life, you could do that. It's the same thing, basically, right?
Mm.
And with in Unity, that's all set up, right? So it's any environment which you do there, that can be you generate, and the next team comes in and adds them to it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about things like ones like Minecraft, whether we could do something in architecture that is more specific to what we need, rather than it being a game, how it becomes a serious game in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I mean, that was a little bit what we did through the Kashgar project, that the environment was captured but was on purpose not completed. So anybody else could go in, collect bricks and textures and stones, add to it and generate more. And then there could be more or whatever. And by that, develop their own heritage interpretation of the city.
Hmm. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, all right. Jan?
Oh, no, I can ask you. We've actually got the meeting next together, so I can ask you my question then.
All right. Good. Wonderful. Okay. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. We appreciate that.